Sessions. We've got some amazing guests in the green room, standing by, waiting to talk to all of you.
In today's world, there's more and more opportunity to have a hybrid in between both of those.
Your job isn't to get into the industry to get rich. Your job is to get into the industry to support and provide the best service you can.
Listen, discover, explore. I mean, it's exactly what I tell the brands that we open retail stores for, right?
Hey, welcome back to another session. This is the Growth and Scaling Sessions. If this is your first time being with us today, I invite guests to come on board with me and talk about ways to grow and scale their business. And today, the topic is super critical because this is a mistake so many businesses make, especially on the smaller end of the scale, but even in big companies. We see massive problems with people doing a poor job of messaging what their brand is, who they solve problems for, and what they do to fix the problems. Sounds simple, sounds stupid, but I'm telling you right now, it is one of the most common problems we see all over the business place, all over the marketplace. And as you look at people posting on LinkedIn and on YouTube, you see the problem just blaring in your face. Cool logo. What do they do to fix my problems? Right? Like, this is something I see all the time. So as we dive into that, I'm going to introduce our guest briefly. But before we do so, today's episode is sponsored by the Captain's Council. If you have not heard about Captain's Council, go check it out at captainscouncil.com. It is there for you if you are a CEO or founder of a small to mid-sized company and you're looking for a peer advisory board. That's right. People who are just like you, building and growing their businesses, who need other people to bounce ideas off of, other people to give them advice, other people to help them cross the bridges that they can't get across by themselves. Captain's Council is there for you. Create your own peer advisory board within the Captain's Council today. With that being said, let's dive into the topic. I'm bringing Paul Sokol in and Sasha Wallinger. Sasha, thank you. Paul, thanks for being here. First of all, you guys, Sasha, you're in the hot seat. What do you see as the most common problem in people's messaging and branding today?
I'm going to say there are three things I think that are critical. The first one is the lack of planning and understanding of strategy. I think that's really hard to surmount if you haven't gotten there at the get-go. So considering that first case, I think that's really, really important to have under your belt. And I think it is hard, as you mentioned in the intro, Todd, to rally behind that when you're a smaller organization. However, it's just as important as it would be for a Fortune 100 organization. So that's my number one. My number two is understanding that there's not only like a visual or a copyrighted communications storytelling, but that they're united. So taking around the dimensionality and creativity, making sure that there's this opportunity to tell a story to a variety of audiences, be they visually inclined, be they auditory inclined. I think that's something that increasingly marketers we're needing to be very cognizant of as our complexity of channels change. That's really important. And number three is making things fun. It really has to be fun. Now, some very austere and difficult topics don't have to be funny, but I think you have to engage with the audience as you would want to be engaged. And I think that gets fallen in the wayside when we're trying to meet different metrics and sound as an expert in things. However, relating person to person and peer to peer and to the consumer, there is this understanding of their experience and making a little bit of light and joy into the world. And that comes across as very whimsical, but it actually can be extraordinarily powerful. So those are my top three.
It's huge. I love those top three. Wow. Thanks for coming in with your own three. That's fantastic. Sasha, why do you think that people make those mistakes? I mean, what's going on there?
I think that with startup mentality, there's frequently the situation where marketing is a complete afterthought, like year 3 afterthought. And I'm sure, Paul, you've seen this too, but we come in as almost this fix-it-all doctor when marketing hasn't been thought of at the onset. That's why I say strategy and planning is really critical. And then I think also there's quite a bit of a fear around marketing budgets. We get a really bad rap as marketers for a large spend without potential return on that investment. That's probably because another marketers crossed path with an organization that hadn't done their due diligence
Yes.
managing the funds. So again, bad
Yes.
rap. But I think there's trepidation around an expenditure that isn't tangibly documented, in the eyes of the budget holder. Of course, I have lots of ideas on that one. But then I think lastly, there's a forgetfulness on the part of organizations, be they, brands or thought leaders, however you want to
Yeah.
couch the conversation, how you can have an amazing product or idea, but it's told in a silo and if you don't distribute it across the right audiences and channels. So I think just a refresher, and I think that that's very innocent. I don't think it's a derogatory, all hail the non-marketeers.
Right.
I think
Right.
it can stand in the way a bit.
Paul, what are your thoughts, man? She just like did a
Comes out.
45-minute discussion in 5 minutes. That was amazing.
Woo! Pulling out
Masterclass.
the heater. That was awesome, Sasha. So like I didn't hear anything that I'm like, oh no, we're missing something, because you're talking like big concepts, like for the planning and the strategy, like you said, misunderstanding where marketing goes. I mean, no matter what you're selling, it's a 3-part journey. If you got the marketing, which leads to sales, which leads to the fulfillment, right? And so by being unclear about your strategy around that in the first place, or why you're doing it, that can make the messaging go all over the place. And then thinking about it, because there's the journey, but then there's also the offer itself, which is talking
Right.
to a particular target audience. Hamburger shops are selling hamburgers to adults and to kids, but the value proposition is different. The messaging is different. The value proposition might be like feed the family for the adult, and then for the kid, it's like have fun and look at colorful pictures. So it's real easy to get all that mixed up, because at the end of the day, the messaging is almost the ground zero of like everything. This is what the ad said. This is
Right.
what the email said. This is what was in this video. And so by being unclear about the strategy, not having any idea around like the value proposition, and then not having any higher level like brand guidelines, or you were talking the mixed dimension messaging,
Right.
Sasha, it's not just, it's what are the brand colors, what are the brand fonts, what's the voice like, what are words that we use, what are words that we never use, like these kinds of things are really important. And yeah, you're right, Sasha. I think a lot of startups don't think about that and give it enough love until a couple years really into it, when in reality they should, it's a judgment, they should do it right from the get-go, or at least as soon as they're starting to get their first couple of customers.
Right.
And then they just use that, because you can always rebrand, which might just be, it's the same logo, maybe you just update our color scheme and like our graphics a little
Right.
bit. Rebranding isn't just a new logo.
And all of those really come off of the initial problem, right? Which is most companies fail to help people recognize they're solving something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is so funny to me when I go to a web page or I see someone's ad and all it talks about are the accolades that they just received for something or other. It tells me nothing. I could care less that you're the top whatever in that whatever. That's all I hear. It's like Charlie Brown, when he's like hearing adults talk and it's like blah 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 blah, right? What are you talking about? Paul, what do you do to help people understand the value prop? Like how do you help people see that you solve a problem? For example, your title, Small Business Hero. Okay, that tells me if I'm a small business owner, I should be listening to Paul right now. You did a good job of that right off the bat. How do you help people tell other people the value prop?
So the value proposition, there's all sorts of formulas and things out there. To me, the value proposition is part of the overall positioning conversation, which you can't even do that unless you're clear about who are you going after, who's the demographics and the psychographics and
Right.
even the behavioristics. How is their life like right now? And then once you're clear on that, you can start to talk about the positioning, and that'll lead to that universal, unique selling proposition, USP, whatever, just that value proposition piece of like, here's what we do. Like people, the value proposition for a drill is you will have a hole in your wall. That's what you're buying. You're buying holes in the wall. You're not
Right.
buying a drill.
Right.
And I guess how I help people is try to get them to step away from their baby because they're so close into it that they
Yeah.
can't look at it objectively without some kind of guidance or some type of help, and almost approaching it scientifically, almost like an engineer or or a person of medicine or somebody would, just to like, what are you actually doing though? And
Sasha, what?
usually they'll say something that is a good proposition and they didn't even think about it. It was just something they said, but being trained to listen for that, I'm like, that's
Right.
the thing right there. That's what they're doing. And then
Sasha, help us out here. Because
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, so I call myself a hidden connections detective, and I think of that as being a translator and
Interesting.
also somewhat of a therapist. And also somewhat of a therapist too, because as Paul's saying, truly, truly, we are coming in the position as marketeers to understand not only how an organization comes across, but how consumers are looking at it. And just like you said, I mean, it was a perfect example, Todd, to look at a page. You made me laugh because who cares about an accolade? It's almost like being in grade school or maybe even
Right.
college, where all you want to do is put into action
Right.
something. You don't actually want to have to be told. And if it's really good, like I don't have to tell you what Nike does. I don't have to tell you what a lot of the brands that we understand do, because it's clear, and that is built on excellent
Right.
marketing. So I do think that there's this, I think, in Web3 world, says Sherpa, but the healing journey that goes along with being a marketeer. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people discuss, but, I get a lot of head nods when I mention it across different marketing groups. So it's being a good
Yeah.
listener and a good distiller, and then a really good translator. And as Paul mentioned, within smaller organizations too, even like small businesses or even startups, providing them with some phased approach options. Because when I step into a startup, especially even if they're pre, 10 million, they don't have a
Right.
huge budget
Right.
to roll. So there's really creative ways to be able to isolate what your brand proposition
Right.
is. And there's, a lot of interesting tools and techniques to get there. It should be fun. When I say hidden connections
Right.
detective, we just unpackage what the unique value proposition or the product
Right.
solve is and have fun getting there. And in those sessions, we are able to then glean some
I love
amazing
it.
campaigns out of that. But it feels very relaxing to the client, because it's not this pressure like, what are we going to say? How are we going to
Totally.
market? It's like, who are you? What are you really going to do? And let's celebrate that. So that's
I
kind
love
of the
it. I
beginning
love
stage,
it.
I
You know
believe.
what? One of the things that this is the growth and scaling sessions. I actually have a growth and scaling podcast, which is very fun because we have people on there who have gotten past that 10 million mark. Like to your point, under 10 million, a lot of times they have a hard time saying what they really do, and they don't have the budget to really spend on marketing. But on the growth and scaling podcast, the very first thing I ask people is, who are you and what problem do you solve? Because they know
Yeah.
exactly what problem they solve. Like anyone who has found success, who is above 10 million in revenue, they know exactly what problem they solve, and they know exactly who they're trying to solve the problem for. And I think that those who are still young and a little bit immature in their business, and I'm not saying in your age young, I mean young in your business,
No.
sometimes you don't recognize yet who your ideal client avatar is. You don't know who your favorite clients are. Paul, walk us through a little bit. How do people figure out who their target really is? Like, I serve 20 people right now. Who are the 3 I like to serve the most? How do you help them do that?
Well, it's so interesting because we're starting to kind of talk about sales a little bit at this point of like, who
A little
do
bit,
we want to
yeah.
work with? And there's the traditional qualification questions for sales, but there's also brand qualification, which I don't know if anybody's spoken about or anything like that. That's something that me and one of the other researchers back in the day figured out, was that somebody may hit all the qualifying points, but they're just a total, jerk, and we would never want to work with them nor expose
Right.
our support team to somebody like that. even though they may be a good client. So looking for one thing is who absolutely loves you. And then also you can look at the other side of the coin and be like, who absolutely hated you or you hated them, and
Yeah,
looking
vice
for why was
versa. I was gonna say it's not
that.
just about whether they like or hate you. It's did you have fun working with that client?
Mhm.
Because if not,
Yeah.
let's avoid them.
It's like doing when you're doing like positioning research and customer profile research. If you're looking at like the competition, so for example, let's say I'm a shoe company, like I would look at the 5-star reviews of Nike, but I'd also want to turn around and look at the 1-star reviews. Like, what do people not like about it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get some language you can use there, or a seed for something that you can be like, well, actually, we're really good at that thing, and we solve that. So, is there a way to do a positive spin around there? You were talking about being trained, Sasha, to hear these things and distilling, and it's just
Yeah.
always having that ear and just always keeping a little feeler out there for language that maybe it shows up in a video or a blog post or somebody says something to you in a conversation, and you might just hear it and be like, that's it. Say that again. That's the
And
thing.
Sasha, I'm curious, when Paul said that, it made me think, when oftentimes when people leave 1-star reviews, it's because it was either the wrong client. Like I remember reading a review one time at a hamburger place. Somebody was complaining about the hot dog, and I'm like, no, they don't have hot dogs. Like they're the wrong person talking about the wrong solution, right?
Right.
And how do you help people nail that target audience? Like, who is your avatar?
Yeah. So I have to just say that when Paul, I can answer that, but I just want to say collaborations are a
Right.
fantastic way to do a beta test as to who your diehard fans are and are not, and a little bit of a toe dip into a market segment growth strategy to see, can I expand into the hot dog consumer if I'm a burger
Right.
joint, right? So I think that's really important. But to your question, I think as regards to the holistic journey, it's a matter of building something that's strong enough to have a climate of fandom around. And I think fandom is under
Yeah.
communicated in the marketing space, but is so critical. And I understand that we're in this business because we're hoping to sell. However, there's this desire and need really to build relationships with a target audience that are not simply
Yeah.
transactional, but that are truly relationships. So deep dives into consumer studies and insights and building that portfolio or kind of like the persona of your target
Right.
audience, even as a small business, really has some value. It could be so aspirational. It doesn't have to be that it's occurring right now, but I'm listening to the Founders podcast, right? And like the profile of all of these incredible founders that didn't take little for
Right.
an answer. And so I think a brand can operate in that same way. And as far as a marketeer to be able to kind of compel them, I always used to say to when I was working early days in deep marketing was like, I have to believe in the future of your organization and see it. And really, that's how I became a foresight strategist now, is I had to believe that 3, 5, 10
Yeah.
years out, this aspirational consumer would be lining up like they did for
Right.
Supreme at the door to find you. And that is a little bit of the leap of faith that one has to take in marketing for a smaller organization, but then also I'll just share too within my work at Nike, developing systems change is really important too. So sometimes you can be known for
Right.
one thing, like being Nike, right? But then there's sustainability that they want to come in and either pick up on that trend or have some different elements layered upon a cultural moment within that brand. So you're shifting. I'm mentioning that within the context of target audience because your target audience may shift
Yeah.
many times throughout the life cycle of your organization. And I think it's important to stay clear on who, again, fandom,
Right.
coming back to fandom, who your really core base is. And you can't just distance, I was going to say to piss them off. So
That's
pardon me,
okay.
you can't piss them off when you're growing, your organization. When I was at Sorel Footwear, where we were making a change from men's outdoor to women's fashion, but we didn't want to upset the men's outdoor consumer because we
Right.
really cared and wanted them still. So it's a matter that segmentation is really tricky, but when you really know your core value proposition, then you can sail through that with a
I love
greater
it.
ease.
I love it. I totally agree with you on that. And Paul, one of the things that Sasha brought up that I kind of want to tag onto is, I see so many small business owners who are pre-scaling mode. They're still kind of in launch mode. They keep themselves in launch mode for a long period of time, sometimes unintentionally, but they do it. And I think part of the reason is that they still don't understand who their target audience is. And sometimes they take a client on just because it's revenue, but they're really miserable fulfilling for that client. Being the small business hero, how do you help people out of that loop of working with people that don't make them happy and finding the right clients?
That's a great question. I have a similar experience personally where I've learned my lesson after, probably maybe 5 or so years, that never take on a website project, no matter how awesome the client is, no matter how long you've known them, no matter how simple it seems like it's gonna be. Just don't, man. Don't. And because there is a trend where like once a year I would just, yeah, this should be easy, and then it's always like a nightmare. So that's I have a website, I, maintain it and admin it, charity
Right.
has all this kind of jazz, but like, I'm not getting paid to do that. And so that kind of answers your question a little bit, is being clear about what you provide, what you offer. So for example, if people are interested in working with me, we will build automation journeys with them, and we will build advertising campaigns with them.
Right.
We don't create the visual creatives for the ads, the images or the videos, but we will provide plenty of creative direction, because usually a lot of the clients already have that there.
Yeah.
And so like, that's what we do. If there's something that's outside of that scope, we're not going to do it.
So know what you do, know who you want to do it for.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last step is being consistent, right? So,
Yeah,
so talk to me about that. Yeah, talk to us, Paul. How does a business stay consistent doing those two things?
So a big part about scaling and growing is documenting the habits. I believe excellence is a habit. Aristotle said that in so many words. And if you have daily habits, then those stack into weeklies, which then feed your monthly or quarterlies and annually. So for example, like quarterly planning, it should be annual planning. If you do that once a year, quarterly planning will be easier. And if like, let's say, so taxes is a good example. If you save weekly all deposits that have come in, save some from there for taxes and profit,
Right.
Profit first. If you do that weekly, then semi-monthly, you're going to be able to easily, monthly, you'll be able to make your payroll taxes easily, which means quarterly, you'll be able to easily report on what you did, which means that annually, it'll be super easy to do your
Hopefully
overall what's going on there. And so it stacks on itself. So to get that consistency as a business, it's being clear about what exactly do you do, and then not necessarily over documenting it, but leaving no room for error. Like McDonald's, I don't know if you've ever seen behind the counter, but they have how the food's made, but it's visual. There's literally no words. It's like an explicit diagram of a Big Mac or whatnot. And so if you can understand, the pickle bin's here and the lettuce bin's here, you can assemble the sandwich. You don't need English.
I love it. So Sasha, as you're the hamburger store and somebody gets mad that you're not offering the right hot dog, what's your solution to that?
I mean, you have consistency running across the screen right now. And I think that is a real foolproof response to that type of, customer service would be the natural answer.
Sure.
You have to train your team, how big it or small, to have an alliance of, like our brand messaging. And I always feel like the employee engagement and the employee education around the messaging, and even, if you're a small business, the type of external outreach you do is largely within your customer service representatives. I mean, that's the best PR you can ever provide, either in store, if it's online, wherever. And I think that's really critical. Another point of marketing that might be overlooked sometimes, but deserves some attention spent. So I think that's important. But in that scenario, I mean, I think that there's this like loop back to the consistency of messaging. Maybe we don't have hot dogs, but we have the best burger in town.
Right.
So go wherever you need to for a hot dog, but when you're hungry for a hamburger, come back to us. And that confidence of messaging comes from being consistent. And then again, I go back to fandom too. So there's the brand message, but then there's also the endorsement of the user generated content. And as you mentioned, the reviews, those speak volumes.
Oh
And
yeah.
especially, as you say, to the pre-$10 million organizations, that's the bread and butter. I mean, when you can't afford a multi-million dollar advertising
Yeah.
campaign, rely heavily on those different, what is it, Google ads, all the different reviews that you can
Totally.
receive with basically very little investment too. So I think those are some critical pathways that exist and are very open to businesses, that they forget about potentially because they're looking to what they don't
Yeah.
have. You can also create a very simple YouTube video suite, very, guerrilla marketing, but, and TikTok, I mean, I think we've seen that for with TikTok too, that is endemic and more core to the base, again, to fandom,
Right.
that feels really authentic so that, again, you bring in that group of loyal fans to your organization early on and then take them with you and don't forget about them when you grow. I
I
think
love
that's
it.
another critical strategy. I think
So,
that's very important to
so
remember as well.
Sasha just leaned on something really interesting, Paul, that I'd love your take on, and that is taking your fans with you. Does that mean new product innovation? Does that mean upselling them to something new? What does that mean to you, Paul?
I guess it means if you're somebody's friend, keep being their friend at the end of the day. Hey,
I like that.
it's almost like being an artist. Like if you were a band and you had the local people that were buying your little demos and EPs and whatnot, and then you eventually got picked up by a big label and went international or whatever, don't turn around and crap on the people that were there for you at the beginning. Bring them with you. If
Right.
anything, those are going to be your most hardcore kind of fans. For the idea of like developing new products. If enough people start asking about hot dogs, okay, well, how can we consistently make a hot dog? Or like, why are people asking for hot dogs? Like, is
Right.
there a shift in the market kind of thing?
Five Guys did it.
What do you mean Five Guys did it?
They got hot dogs and they're a burger place.
They have hot dogs now? Wow.
They do.
That's impressive. But you want to talk about super consistent, almost every Five Guys experience is all the exact same.
It is. Yeah.
It's yeah, and I love that the menu is so small too. Like
Yep.
they're very distinct about what they have, and you can have anything you want as long as it's on the menu.
Yep. Yep.
And they didn't take the peanuts out of the store when they got the hot dogs.
That would be weird.
Which is
wouldn't
that
make
bring
any
your
sense.
fans
Yeah.
with you. Bring your fans with you. Yeah, don't forget about the people that came in for the peanuts in
Yeah.
the first place.
I love it. So, Sasha, finish that thought because I know I could see your mind working the whole time Paul was talking there. What are your thoughts there?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's just critical to remember literally the example of why people found you in the
Yeah.
first place and not forget about that. So I mentioned I do a lot of collaborations. I do a lot of really weird intersections between fashion and technology and different ways to discover brands through unexpected portals of segmentation. And that is the critical piece, is taking that. I don't like using brand DNA, but what's core
Yeah.
to the brand and the organization, what's core to the message with you when you take a leap. When we were talking about the hot dogs, I was thinking, get a good collaborator who does great
Right.
hot dogs. Do some events, build it together, make it viral. Do you have to do a TikTok dance if you want to get a hot dog free from our partner.
Right.
So, like, make it creative and fun. In other words, and then what you've done is you've deepened your base because you showed that you heard from them, but you've also upheld the trust and commitment that you set forth by simply being a burger
Right.
place. And you're not going to veer from that, right? Five Guys is an example where you can add it on, but maybe you don't want to, and maybe that's not part of your growth strategy. So, but you're finding, and you're almost acting as an ambassador to the best hot dog place in town because your consumers have come in demanding that. Then you open up your market segment, not just to those people that you have in store, but who you've aligned with via collaboration at the hot dog place, and they're coming to you when they want a hamburger. So it's kind of a win-win. And I think that can be, that's a very simple model, but it can be extended out across utilizations of social channels, and developing a real overarching way that you
Love it.
practice And then you become known not for the accolades on your website, back to
Right.
your earlier comment, Todd, but for what you do and how you practice. And I think that's so valuable. That's something you
All
can't
right. So
buy.
last thought. I want to kind of close with this, and I'll give each of you a chance to comment on it. But Sasha, a lot of small businesses, especially big businesses as well sometimes, but small businesses,
Yeah.
they started with the intention of solving one thing. They're a little bit better at solving something else. We talked about consistency. We talked about knowing our audience. We talked about, what problem do we solve? How do you make sense of that in your head and say, you know what? Either stay in your lane or let's do this other problem. Let's solve this other problem. What are your thoughts on that? And because a lot of people listening, I think, are in that position of like, I wanted to solve this, but I'm actually really good at this.
Two answers. One, you know why you got involved in whatever business you got involved in the
Right.
first place, and you know that business best. That's why you started out. And I hope you love it, because if you don't love it, then you're not doing the thing that you
Right.
should be doing, let's say. So definitely stay clear with that solution provide. But you're also a founder or a lead of an organization because you have the capacity to look far and be elastic. And so when your consumer is indicating to you that you have something that you might not have seen yourself, it's really important to listen to that. And it doesn't mean that you have to shift all that you do and your
Right.
product becomes, different, but you have to be able to be responsive. As I mentioned, you have to be able to listen
Love
to
it.
your audience, because there is a trust that you are always needing to fuel. To, like any good relationship, you have to connect. This is why I say I'm a therapist, right? You have to keep on listening. And if you're going to address, addressing and taking action. So it's really hard to say, you should go this way, you should go that way. But when you are core and understanding what you do and why you do it, then usually I've seen smaller organizations understand why they're not deepening their product offerings at a point in time. Maybe it's for later, maybe it's for the future, maybe it's coming up, or maybe there's an acquisition. I mean, there's so many different ways to slice that. But I do believe that the people who are the foundations of the brand know exactly what they're doing.
Love it.
They sometimes just need to take that pause and have a helper,
like a third party
to
consultant or
listen.
somebody, a coach.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, someone like
I
that. Yeah,
totally
yeah. Thank you.
agree with you. Paul, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that you work with, being a small business hero, they're usually solving the wrong problems. That's why they stay a small business forever.
Yeah, not being it's interesting. They solve a problem and they do it really well, and they may not even be aware that like that's the thing that people like about them.
Right.
So and that's okay. They, like you said, Sasha, they're there because they're leaders. They have the capacity to take on and see what's coming up. So a good example is like for small businesses, they'll be like an agency type model, and then they'll pop off and develop their own kind of software, like a SaaS. Two totally different businesses. I would say and I think you've mentioned both of these things at this point as well, Sasha, which is really cool. It's nice and validating for everybody. You said start with the why, basically, which why did you get into this in the first place? If your why has nothing to do with needing software to make this bigger thing in this example, then you don't necessarily want to do that, or maybe it does. The other thing is what's the long-term strategy? Because in the case, in my opinion, if you're going into two different pretty different business models or sectors, like if you're a hamburger joint and then you also want to manufacture TVs, you kind of need two distinct brands
Right.
for it. Just brand A, brand B, just at the end of the day. And so if that makes sense and you can accept that responsibility as a business owner, go for it. But yeah, kind of start it where you were, look at where you're going, and then really get on the court with yourself and say, is this just a distraction?
Right.
Am I looking to do this other thing because I'm not happy with how my current thing is?
Right.
And then you can keep digging, well, why is that? Why is that? And get down to the core of what's going on. Because it's almost like adopting a kid. Like you can't just be like, oh, here's this new thing, here's this new brand, and then you don't love it and feed it and make it go to school, that kind of stuff.
I love it. Paul, that's awesome. Sasha, I really appreciate both of you being on with me today, because this is such a huge, huge thing. And for those of you listening, I hope you've gained something out of this. You really, really, really got to consider these three things. First of all, what problem are you solving? What's your value proposition? Who are you helping is the next one. It is so important that you know exactly who you're targeting. All three of us have probably run ad campaigns where it's so confusing because your client is just like blasting all of Facebook. Everyone's my client, right? Everyone's my client. No, let's nail it down. Who do you like to help the most? And once you figure that out, be consistent and people will know where to find you. These three things are so important. And so I'm so glad that we all kind of validated each other in the importance of these things. Sasha, she's got a whole list of other things that are going to help you along the way. I highly recommend follow all three of us on our LinkedIn. We are all adding content regularly. Check it out. Engage with us. We love communicating with people in our audiences. And so thanks so much for being here, you guys. This episode is sponsored by the Captain's Council. And for those of you that haven't checked it out already, go now. Go check it out, thecaptainscouncil.com, because there is a place for those that are in that $5 to $50 million range of business where they just need a peer advisory board. They need other people who are in the throes of growing their business at the same stage as they are, telling them, oh my gosh, I ran into that pit 3 weeks ago, and this is what I did to get out of it. Every business owner needs other business owners, and a peer advisory board can help you like none other. Check out captainscouncil.com. And thank you so much for being here on the Growth and Scaling Sessions. We'll catch up with you all the next week. We'll see you then.
Bye.